I'll wait for the thumbs up. So I'll officially say good morning. Good morning, good to see you again. It's been 2 weeks. Was a pleasure to hear Tom give some exhortations from the Psalms, but we are back in the pastoral epistles. 1 Timothy chapter 3, we're going to be reading verse 8 to 13. So verse 8 to 13. Likewise, deacons must be reverent, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy for money, holding the mystery of the faith with a pure conscience, and let these also first be tested, then let them serve as deacons, being found blameless. Likewise, their wives must be reverent, not slanderous, temperate, faithful in all things. Let deacons be the husband of one wife, ruling their children and their house well. For those who have served well as deacons obtain for themselves a good standing, great boldness in the faith which is in Christ Jesus. And we'll probably go a little bit further than that, but for now, it's 8 to 13. Now, it is obvious we've been on the topic of deacons, part of a greater subject matter, which is leaders and officers in the Lord's household. What is the pastor? What is the elder? What is the overseer? What is the deacon? And what I said 2 weeks ago was churches get confused and they conflate that. Tom was telling me recently he was in discussion with a dear friend from a church, and they seem to confuse deacons as elders or under pastors, and then they had one kind of super elder or the pastor running the church. That's not the structure we get from the Bible, from the pastorals, which is all about how to do church. Now, do we want to be rigid, and do we want to be, this is the way and there's no other way? I'm personally not like that, but I prefer the biblical structure. I am quite passionate about it, but it's not, hey, a deal breaker, this fellow church is going to hell because you don't think like that. We're in the kingdom together. Deacons. 2 weeks ago, I explained what the word or the primary word used for deacons are. There's more than one, and primarily one in the pastorals. And the underlying meaning is servant, minister, to serve, ministering, ministries. You get the idea. And there's a whole separate sermon on how to do service and serving in the church. What kind of attitude we do that with. That's probably for another time. But in my preambles, and I always give preambles, I did mention this. All the Lord's people have an obligation to serve, right? But when we're talking about the deacon, we're talking about an official title given to someone who is recognized in a particular category of service. Okay? That's what we're talking about. They are officers, but every believer has a duty, not a word we hear often today, to serve. And I read Luke 17. In fact, we are to see ourselves as unprofitable servants. We're doing it for free from the heart. And that doesn't mean that Christ thinks our service is of no value, but rather we ought to have, like I said, the heart that serves not for merit, but for the joy of serving. I am of the opinion that a genuine Christian would feel incomplete and dead if they're not serving the Lord in some capacity, and they don't have that joy that they're meant to have. So everyone's got an obligation to serve. But then we have the officers, the deacons, the servants, right? And then I went on to talk about why we need deacons. And I read from Acts chapter 6. This is just a quick recap. Acts chapter 6 gives us not so much the official church office of deacon, but the pattern or the prototype, the beginning. Remember, we're reading quite late. This is in the 60s now. The church starts in the early 30s, right? So we're 30 years in. So obviously there's an office now, but in Acts 6, there was an issue, there was a problem, and 7 men were chosen to serve, and that's kind of the pre-deacon, deacon we get in the Bible. That's the pattern. And that led to 4 points on why we need deacons. Why we need deacons. So I feel the need to actually at least give you that. Why do we need deacons? Well, what do deacons do? That's another way to put it. Well, we need them because they need to free up the elders so that they teach, devote themselves to God's word, prayer, and shepherding. We got all these from Acts chapter 6. We can get them from various other parts of the Bible, but mainly Acts chapter 6. This was 2 weeks ago. We also need deacons to minister hospitality to the Lord's people. Okay? Minister hospitality to the Lord's people. To aid in practical matters pertaining to the Lord's people. Finance, logistics, efficiency, how to move things around, how to distribute. Also, and this is the fourth point I gave, and this is an important one, to help absorb the fallout from church drama. One man of God called them shock absorbers. So in Acts chapter 6, there was a complaint. A certain group of people was being neglected, and the apostles, acting as elders at the time, in function, said, deal with this. We got to raise men who need to deal with this. Right? And they acted as shock absorbers. And what I said was that the deacons should be mature Christians, or at least qualified enough to handle situations before they're escalated to the elder board. Right? They should have that wisdom. Now, I wish that every member in every church had that kind of wisdom or qualification, but alas, it is not to be. You get all sorts in the church membership. You get weak Christians, you get strong Christians, you get fake Christians, sometimes waking their way into the church membership. Deacons are proven, as we will see. They're to be tested. Same as elders are to be tested. And there's a list of qualifications for them. We don't raise up deacons willy-nilly. We're supposed to look at the list, look at what we started going through 2 weeks ago, and those were the qualifications of the deacons outlined for us, so we know what kind of people we want. So we did go through 4. Okay? We did go through 4. And we got up to number 5, solid in gospel, reverence, and living. In case you're wondering, if you read the passage, they have to be not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy for money. And that's where we stopped. So we are up to verse 9, holding the mystery of the faith with a pure conscience. And how we've interpreted that is they have to be solid in gospel reverence and living. They're solid in gospel reverence and living. When you see the word mystery in the New Testament, it can mean hidden or deep truths, usually referring to that which was not revealed in the Old Covenant, which is now made clear in the New. Right? It's also another word for gospel. We can interpret the verse this way: holding the hidden or deep or wonderful truths of the faith with a pure conscience. What does it mean, pure conscience? Right? That suggests that they hold the gospel truly and firmly. It's always on their mind. It's always a backdrop for everything they do in a way that gives no ground for accusation personally by their own conscience. Right? These are people who hold the gospel message in high regard, who hold the truths in the Bible in high regard, and their whole life is dictated by these truths. They don't see the gospel or church as a side issue or something they do in the week or something to do to gain, recognition or something to do to tick a box. It goes deeper for them. Usually these are the people who will naturally serve, whether they're given an opportunity to or not. Did you get me? These are usually the people who have a heart to serve, whether you ask them to or give them the opportunity to or not. They have a high view of gospel reverence for their Lord, reverence for the message. And you see they're always finding ways to serve God and by extension his people. And they do so with a pure conscience. Right? They don't do it in a way that they can be accused primarily in this verse by their own conscience or even by others, as we would read later on. 2 Corinthians 1:12 is a good parallel. Paul says, our boasting is this: the testimony of our conscience that we conducted ourselves in the world with simplicity. And that doesn't mean dopiness. That means that's the opposite of deceit, in truthfulness, in sincerity. So we conducted ourselves in simplicity, truthfulness, godly sincerity, not with fleshly wisdom, but by the grace of God and more abundantly toward you. And he says this is a testimony of our conscience. My conscience is clear in this area. I wasn't deceiving. I wasn't self-seeking, and I was genuinely sincere in my service. There's a deacon. They've got to be solid in gospel reverence, gospel living, to the point where they, with Paul, can say, look, I'm doing my best, my conscience is clear, I'm sincere, and I'm far from deceptive. And this permeates every area of their life. You can recognize a heart of service or one who is gifted in the service. And again, those are the people you want serving as deacons. They're going to be, they tend to be the most reliable people. They tend to be the people who want to first please God, then please man. You put them anywhere, they're serving the Lord. It's just a different way of saying what I've been saying. So that's qualification number 5. We did have not given to wine, not violent. We did have reverent, double-tongued, not given to wine, greedy for money. And now we have solid in gospel reverence and living. Now, we move on to verse 10. It says this, let these also first be tested, then let them serve as deacons, being found blameless. There's that word again, blameless. That's a synonym from the elder qualification listed in Titus 1, 6-7, right? But let me point this out first. There's got to be some sort of scrutiny or testing. How do you test someone in this manner? You observe them, you talk to them, you pray about them. Usually these are the kind of people who shine, right? Let me repeat this then. It is a mistake to prop up anyone and everyone on a whim to the office of deacon. And there are churches who do that. We've got a new convert in the church. We don't know much about him. He seems like he's on fire or she's on fire. Bang, let's put them in an office. Let's make them a deacon. Let's make them a youth minister. That's not that. It's not like we're making them a pastor. Even I would say it's a mistake to put them on a ministry like IT or ministering to children. Sunday school always seems to cop this type of treatment. This person, they're on fire, they're a Christian, put him in the Sunday school. No, they're teaching your children. They have authority over your children. They're teaching your children. They've got to love and serve the Lord's babies. In essence, Jesus had a very loving and high view of children, right? And looking after children and cultivating children. And so deacons are to be tested. Again, we have the litmus paper, we have the qualifications, we know what they're supposed to be. Here's a list for us. So we take our time and we review, or obviously, some things will always slip through the cracks, but we do our best to scrutinize for these traits, and then we nominate and then we ordain deacons and deaconesses in the case of our church. So firstly, there must be scrutiny or testing. We don't lay hands on anyone hastily. That's what Paul said to Timothy. All right? Now, we're not sure, again, if Paul is referring to a formal test or informal observation. Either way, like I said in the preambles, no, I didn't. Look, we're not looking for perfection. No one's perfect. You're going to find something in everyone. We're looking for direction. We're looking for life pattern. We're looking for attitude. Attitude, to me, is worth more than action, right? If I see a person doing everything but with a rotten attitude, that's a disqualifier. And vice versa. If I see a person with the right attitude, but they're struggling for whatever reason to do, that still makes them potential deacons. Right? Now, they must be considered blameless when the testing is done. Right? And that's a synonym, like I said, of the qualification of elder in Titus. Overall, in character, what it means is they need to be unaccusable of any compromising sinful life pattern, and unaccusable of any one major blot. I said this when I was speaking about blameless when it came to elders, that may warrant reproach, right? It could be one heinous bad sin that may disqualify them, or it could be not a great life pattern or hard attitude. So we could say point 6 is they've got to be blameless under scrutiny. Do deacons need to be? And that's important. Now, I hope you're not hearing deacons, deacons, deacons. I hope you're hearing me. Right? I hope you're hearing I need to be this as well. Right? Again, we take deacons from members and they're the ideal servants. Right? What does every Christian want to be? An ideal servant. That should be part of our prayer. Really is. We should be praying to be these things. And I said the same with the qualifications of an elder. So I hope you're not separating them in your mind like that. Now, the next one. Verse 11. The dreaded verse 11. The NKJV, the ESV, and the CSB say likewise their wives. The NASB, the NIV, and the Legacy Standard Bible say likewise the women. So we look at verse 11. Likewise their wives, or likewise the women, must be reverent, slanderous, temperate, faithful in all things. And I feel compelled, it might be boring to you, but I think it's important just to mention that there's a debate. Is there such a thing as women deacons? Should there be such a thing as women deacons? And if there isn't, or if there is, why not? Well, you're looking at the verse. Why not? Because of verse 11. Or why? Because of verse 11. You see, that word goes both ways, right? Gynekes, I'd probably ruined it, right? But that can be translated wives or women. So some churches have female deacons as an office. This is what we're talking about. Obviously, there are women who serve. We're talking as an office because the subject matter is offices in the church, right? Or, no. If we do that, then we're playing with this idea that women are, or we're compromising the reality that women are not to have authority over men, right? So we'd rather not have women deacons. We'll have women serving, but not officially in a title as deacons. And then there are other churches like ours that says, no, we'll have them as officers. That brings accountability, but we'll be careful to make sure that they maintain the created order and the right function and not be given authority over men. There's a debate. And why are they mentioned here? Why are wives mentioned here? Are they, the wives of male deacons who help serve their husbands in areas where their husbands couldn't? Imagine a male deacon is called to minister to a woman and she's sick. He can't go touching her everywhere. So he might bring along his wife and, you know what, love, take care of this woman. Here's what she needs. And then she can go in and do her thing. That seems to be the prominent view of what Paul is describing for those who don't believe that he's talking about the office of deaconess. Right? Or is Paul talking about the office of deaconess? That's the question. Now, I'm not staunch. I'll give you arguments of both views, and a local church can decide on what they want to do. Some people are staunch, not me. Whether you have deaconesses or not, it doesn't worry me. I'm not going to judge a church. I'm not going to write off a church. Part of the problem is that the word deacon in the Bible can be applied to male and female as well, right? It wasn't until after, in the early church, in that Greek, where we get the actual female deaconess, right? So early church had many mentions of female deacons. They did exist in the early church. But in this time in the Bible, the word for deacon applies to male and female. That's another issue we have in trying to work out who it is. Look, let me give you the best arguments from both views. Make up your mind. I'm not staunch. I will maintain that our church keeps the office of deaconess because it gives accountability. It binds us to qualify them against this list, and that's better for me in general. They're not having authority over men. They're not bossing our elders around. They're not bossing you around. That's fine by me, right? But let me give you the two, the arguments for both views. Okay, the wives' view. The wives of male deacons. These are wives. The word should be translated wives. These are the people who say they are wives. And they go to Acts 6. Look, if you look at Acts 6, we know it's not talking about this type of deacon, but it is a pattern. It is a pre-deacon deacon. And guess what they were? They were men. In Acts 6, it was 7 men chosen. And we would respond, was it was in Jerusalem. It was a Jewish church. How would they have felt if women were doing that kind of thing? But sure, you're right. Acts 6, they were men. Right? Also, and this is a big one, in verse 12, it mentions that deacons must be the husband of one wife, ruling their children in their own house as well. Why doesn't it mention that women should be faithful to husbands? It does say that about widows in 1 Timothy 5. Why is it only saying they should be the husbands of one wife? Now, there are answers to that. If I give them to you, I'm kind of playing sides, right? So I'm wondering if I should just give you that and leave you with it. If you're curious, come ask me after what I think about that. Huh? So they also say it feels like you're breaking the passage up, right? It's talking about deacons, and then it mentions women, and then it mentions men, husbands as one wives. It's a weird breakup, okay? And they'll say this. There is a woman mentioned as a deacon, Phoebe, in Romans 16. Remember we spoke a bit about Phoebe? They'll say, look, that's just inconclusive. That's one of the arguments as well. That's inconclusive. You can say that Phoebe is a deacon of that church, and the church is named by name, right? But that doesn't mean Phoebe was in her office. Okay, fair enough. I don't agree with that, but fair enough. Like I said, I mean, I have a view and I have answers for these, but here they are. All right, and this is a big one. This is our last... well, there's more than this, but these are, in my opinion, the main ones. The ones who have the wise view maintain that whether you like it or not, deacons do exercise some sort of authority, even in service. So we're kind of disregarding that, what Paul said about women not having authority over men. I do have to respond to that. I disagree. The service of a deacon is broad. You know, we've got a woman handling the food or running certain things in the church. Doesn't mean she's having authority over a man, but whatever. I get it. And that's the biggest reason why there's hesitancy to ordain deaconesses. Because in this day and age, people will take that to mean she's a pastor or she's an elder. And I get that. I actually do. I'll give them that. Okay? So there's the wives of deacons' view. Then you have the women deacons' view. And the biggest one there is, well, okay, let's say they are the wives of men who have to serve, and the men can't serve, so then the women help them out. Why aren't there qualification then for elders' wives? Because they'd be doing that as well. They'd be serving and helping elders out in ways elders can't, because elders still did serve. They didn't just teach and study, they shepherded. So why aren't their wives mentioned? And the reason is because you can't have a woman pastor, so there's no qualification for women mentioned there, but you can have a women deacon. And that's a big one, right? So it's more likely that Paul is talking about qualification for women deacons, because this section is talking about officers, and he doesn't say anything about elders' wives. Why mention deacons' wives? It just doesn't make sense. That's a big one. They also say the adverb, likewise, suggests a distinct group within the same category, deacons. But the other side can counter that as well. You have to understand there's a bit of back and forth. So I'm playing devil's advocate as well. Trying to be as neutral as I can, but the fact is I'm not. I have a view. All right? We also say that there are parallel structures in verses 8 and 11. These instructions to women, which you're about to receive, look like qualifications for doing ministry. For someone who's actually doing ministry officially. because of the parallels in the passage. They'll also say there's no qualifier, there's no definite article. Definite article is like the. So when it says likewise the women, the is not there in the original language. It's either likewise wives or likewise women. And they say that's kind of awkward. That seems a bit funny. And then there's Phoebe again. Remember what I said about Phoebe. In Romans 16:1, Paul commends Phoebe, who was the letter carrier. Remember? She carried the letter, and she was clearly affiliated with the church of Cenchrea as a servant of that church. Now, if it just says, Phoebe, my fellow servant, all right, she's a servant. When he says she's a servant of the church in Cenchrea, that somehow means that her position as servant is attached to the church in Cenchrea. So what do we say? We say Phoebe was called a deacon, and it's attached to this church, so deaconesses? And the other side will say, nah, you guys are pushing it, you're stretching it. Calm down, sit down. We're like, okay, man, leave Phoebe alone. And they say, no, Phoebe was a fellow servant, word, and all that kind of stuff. We just go back and forth. So, I don't know. I have my view. One more thing for the women deacon view. If this is a funny one. In verse 12, right? Verse 12, there is a reference to husbands, all right, one wife, ruling their children and ruling their house well. All right? If the teammate of the husband is in view, why isn't there a reference or a qualification to their devotion to their family lives? All right? Maybe Paul had women in mind who were free from child rearing or homemaking responsibilities. And that's a big maybe. That's not the strongest one, but it's a possibility. I don't know if you understood that. The idea is, okay, if their wives are in view, shouldn't it be included that they're devoted to their families as well? And, along with their husbands? Or could he have just mentioned husbands? Here it is. Because deaconesses were often women who were free from their homemaking responsibilities or childbearing responsibilities. Single women. All the single ladies. Right? So, there you go. So, regardless whether or not it's wives or women, they have their own qualifications. Make up your mind. Our church has opted to go with the women view. So, we have deaconesses. We hold them accountable. I'm fine either way. All right? I'm not going to kill anyone over it. I hope they don't kill me over it. Not a big deal. Either way, women have their qualifications, wives have their qualifications. If you look at verse 11, they have to be reverent, not slanderers, temperate, faithful in all things. Okay? So, reverent, same word in verse 8. We went through that. They have to have a seriousness about what they're doing, a seriousness toward the gospel, a reverence towards the gospel with a clear conscience. Slanderer, diablos. Whose name is that? That's a word for what? That's Satan. That's where we get the word Satan from. Same word used of Satan. The adversary. The slanderer. Adversary is another title of his, right? They are able to control their tongues. What's slander? Slander is gossip with the intent to harm, hurt, right? Or downgrade. It's not like, hey, did you see her dress? That was really nice. Oh, you're gossiping. Or, you know what, I had a talk to her and I spoke to her about her weight. I love her so much, but I think she's harming herself. We have to find a way to help her. That's not gossip. Chill out, right? Gossip would be, man, you know what? Look at all that weight she's put on. Where is she getting that food from? Have you noticed the food from the church fridge is missing and that food belongs to the kids? Maybe she's stealing the food and eating it while we're not. No evidence. It's just, it's an intent. What's the implication? She's stealing food. Yeah, it's the first thing that came to my head. Sorry. Yeah? It's intent to hurt. And that's what Satan does. He accuses. The idea of the word is accusation. He stands there accusing. It could be so passive-aggressive, which I think women are amazing at. Passive-aggressive accusations, subtle accusations. Men too, for that matter, but this is a problem. They need to be in control of their tongues. They need to be aware of what they're saying lest it hurt people. And, anyone could be hurt with anything, but they need to be aware that they're not maliciously or purposely trying to accuse or hurt someone with their language in a way that's undeserved. Listen, if someone's done something wrong, you got to say they've done something wrong. If she is stealing food from the fridge, it's not wrong to say, hey, I think Anne is stealing food from the fridge. Maybe we should look into that. That's not slander, So they need to be in control of their tongues. And women who serve in that capacity in our church, pay attention, right? All these qualifications are yours. These are just added ones for you. And usually when that happens, it's because these are a problem for that particular group. Or these are recognized to be an issue for that particular group. Malicious gossips, false accusations, and that does tend to be women. Sorry to say. That's what they tend to do. Gossip, talk, kind of stab each other in the back. We see it in our little girls, they do the same thing. So, they've also got to be temperate. And that's the same word used of an elder, which means sober-minded, self-control, for the sake of judgment and discernment. So they have to be temperate and self-controlled, not under the influence of any addicting substance that may impede their judgment or anything really. They must also be faithful in all things. Now, that's a big one. That's a general requirement that indicates she's trustworthy in all things. You can look at this woman and say, you know what? As the pattern of Christian living, she's an example of that. She's faithful in all things. I can trust this person. I can trust them with my children. I can trust them to minister to this woman who needs it. I could trust her to be on her own and to, make sure everyone touched grass is down to earth, biblical, and God-honoring. She's got to be faithful in all things. And that includes, we could say, this is a counter to one of our pro-women arguments. That could include her family life. There it is. Faithful to her husband, faithful to her children, faithful to her duties in the home. She's just reliable. The kind of woman you'd give a letter to and trust her to take it to Rome in good conscience. Kind of a Phoebe. All right? Trustworthy. Then we move on to males, which is a problem. Verse 12, right? 8. Again, this is a big deal in the ancient world. Got to be a one-woman man. Now, men weren't marrying multiple women. Okay? There was this concept of univera, which mainly was directed at women. It was a good thing to be faithful to your home and husband. Now, Paul is saying men as well. One of the reasons I believe he mentions men here and not women is because of this concept of univera, even though it included men in the ancient world, primarily targeted women. It was social taboo for a woman to be unfaithful to her husband, not marrying multiple men, but just overall unfaithful. Rebellious. Paul is saying, no, he's got to be a one-woman man as well. And remember what I said that means. Not that he's going around marrying multiple women. That just didn't happen in the early church, right? But he's got to be faithful in attitude, in action to his spouse. And I would take that to mean not overly flirtatious, putting her above and first others, especially of the same gender. And there are only two. Had to throw that in there, right? In this day and age, you have to throw that in there, right? And I always think of the youth group leader, right? Who's kind of, all the little girls look up to him and they like him and they think he's a great shub and a man of God. And so he's open to he has several options, so he's flirting with everyone. No, even before you're married, you've got to be one woman man. And even after you're married, you've got to watch out. Your wife deserves the best seat, not your mate or your friend or some other woman, and likewise for the women. Later on, again, Paul is talking about widows who qualify for support, and he's saying she has to have proven that she's been a one-man woman. Now, her husband is dead. What do you mean by that, Paul? No, before that, she had to be faithful to her husband mentally and physically. Not flirtatious with other men, not always thinking another man is better than her husband, not always thinking he could do it better, not always actually devoted to her husband as an act of will, not emotion. Bible doesn't generally deal with emotions, doesn't care about your feelings. They come as a natural, organic overflow from the act of will, from the obedience that we are told that we have to have. So it needs to be a one-woman man, faithful to his marriage in attitude and action, devoted mentally and physically to his wife. Got to also manage children and the household well. You see why the advocates of the wise view have a problem with this. Men are the managers, and men can be one-women men. Right? So there you go. There's some clout, not clout, what do they call it? Yeah, clout in your direction. So he's got to manage the children and household well. This is often overlooked. A deacon must be a good manager all round in his life. Children, possession, servants, which would include employees today. What does it mean to manage your household well? What's the standard we're looking at? It would imply that if a deacon had children he couldn't control or rebellious children, like we discussed with the elders, his children have to be faithful, he has to manage his house well. That would imply he's disqualified. Yeah? Or even their possessions. To manage your house well would include your possessions. If a deacon is a bad steward, that might even disqualify him. You know what I mean by bad steward? Very unwise in spending the Lord's money, which has been entrusted to him. Everything you possess is the Lord's. He's given it to you. He's loaned it to you. You're the steward. You're the servant. And he's just bad at managing it or selfish with it, disqualified from being deacon. So manage your children and household well. And finally, Paul adds in 1 Timothy 3:13, so this is verse 13, those who have served well as deacons obtain for themselves a good standing and great boldness in the faith which is Christ Jesus. I was mesmerized by this. You know what? Elders are given warnings, right? Double blessings, but double warnings. If you don't do this right, you're in trouble. But what he says about the deacons, those who've served well obtain for themselves a good standing, an elevated pedestal. Imagine, if you serve well as a deacon, in Christ's mind, you are elevated. Is that talking about reward? They will be exalted by God if in their humble and godly service, and not only exalted by God, I reckon respected by their fellow brethren. This is the kind of person you give your respect to. They attain for themselves a good standing, which means greater reward from God, whether temporal or eternal, could be either or, and greater respect from your fellow brethren. All right? They also, and this is the part that mesmerizes me, they gain tongue twister. They gain great boldness in their faith. What does that mean? That seems to mean they gain assurance, confidence, right? Because they're serving faithfully and it's recognized by all, and they're not doing it for that reason, they gain greater assurance, greater confidence in their faith. To be able to defend it and to be able to validate themselves as believers. That's what he seems to be saying. So how precious is a faithful deacon, both for others around them and for themselves? How precious is a faithful believer overall? Remember, don't just think deacon, right? So what I gather from this is this. If I'm a faithful servant, deacon or not, right? Not only would that increase, and that's with the right attitude, that's with a humility, humble attitude, that's with a reverent attitude, all these qualifications, I will not only gain greater reward, and I'm not doing it for that, that would just happen, because I'm thinking unprofitable servant, remember? Right? I will also help increase my assurance. Like Peter's language, make sure the calling of your faith, or these things, you do these things, you'll ensure the assurance of your faith. And that's something worth striving for, wouldn't you say? Whether you're striving for the office of deacon or not. I'd love to have that. I'd love to have good assurance. I'd love to have boldness. I'd love to have elevation, not among you, but in the eyes of Christ. Well done, good and faithful servants. What a word I'd love to hear. That's something good to strive for. And that kind of ends that section on deacons. Now, I did opt to kind of go into verses 14 and 15. We do have a little bit of time, so I'll do it. Okay? And maybe I'll flesh it out a little bit more later. The reason I wanted to do it is I want to answer the question, how important is this? Is this important? Is this important to a church? Because a lot of churches today gloss over this. Nah, don't have to have the structure. Like I said, I don't condemn them to hell, right? We don't have to do it this way. We don't have to have the structure. We don't have to do all these things. We don't really have to pay attention. We don't really have to screen. We don't really, get the new convert, get him in there, get as many people as you can inside, give them ministry. That's how my church did it when I was young, to my shame. No, they're a Christian. They prayed the prayer. They've done a few good things. They've gone out. They've preached to people, put him in this ministry. That was a disaster. Is this important? Have a look. We've gone through this verse as we've been making our way through Timothy. We've referenced this verse or these verses again and again. Have a look at verses 14 and 15. These things I write to you, though I hope to come to you shortly. We're not sure if he ever did make it there. But if I'm delayed, I write to you so you may know how to conduct yourself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the household of God, the pillar and ground, which is foundation of truth. Ephesians 2:19, household of God. Why is this important? Why is it important that we take this pattern, take this structure, and actually be a little bit, eager to follow it? Because this is how we do church. Church is God's household. It's not a community club. It's not a social gathering. This is the household of God. There's an etiquette. There's an ideal etiquette, right? Listen, I walk into your house. Some of you want me to take off your shoes. Some of you don't. I've got to conform to your standard. I'm in your house, right? Some of you don't want me using particular cutlery. Some of you don't want me touching your walls. Some of you don't want me going in certain areas. There are forbidden zones in people's houses. Your rules, your house. Some of you get a little bit too much about that. George, take off your shoes, put them there neatly, in that position outside, make sure they're this, make sure they're that. We can only use it. Okay, man, I love you. All right, I'll do it. It's your house, your rules. All right? God's house, God's standards, God's rules. This is how you ought to conduct yourself in the house of God. Timothy, that's why I'm writing to you. Everything up until this point. Give ear to doctrine. Deal with false teachers. Right? Do these things. Make sure that women are behaving this way. Make sure they're dressing modestly. Make sure they're not putting it over men and disordering God's ideal template. Right? Make sure these are your elders. Make sure this is what they look like. And your deacons, make sure this is what they look like. And their wives or their women, whatever you want. Make sure this is what they do. And I'm writing these things to you. I sent you there to fix God's household. Do these things. This is why I'm writing to you. I may never make it. I want to come to you. This is how you ought to conduct yourself. God's household is the pillar and foundation of the truth. Take this seriously. The church belongs to the living God. It's his family, his house. Not evangel. It's his body. It's his house. It's purchased by his blood. In Acts 20, he told the Ephesian elders, shepherd the church of God. He purchased it with his own blood. It's precious. Make sure you do a good job. And we're in Ephesus now. Clearly something went wrong. They done gone messed up. So here we are again. And see the church as it upholds his truth. It's the light shining in the dark. By the way, verse 15. The church is a pillar and ground of truth. That's Catholic quote 101. You got to listen to the church. It's a pillar and ground of... Who said it's you? Listen to the church, pillar and ground of truth. Pillar and ground, truth. What does a pillar do, sir? Well, what does a foundation do? It holds something up. It doesn't determine truth. That's what they do. The Orthodox system, the Catholic systems, the church determines. No, it holds it up. It holds it up. It upholds it. It maintains it. It recognizes it. It doesn't define it. Do you understand? The truth is already there. The church is meant to hold it up, shine the light unto all the world, and that is why it's called the pillar and grounding or the foundation of the church, truth. It is subject to the truth. It holds it up. It declares it to everyone. Right? It safeguards it. So, Ephesus, the Ephesians would have been able to visualize this well. There's a famous temple, one of the ancient seven wonders of the world, Diana Artemis. She was psycho. Look, statues are terrible and everything, but it was a wondrous temple. Still exists today, right? The Temple of Diana, 127 pillars, just over 18 meters long. Can you imagine? This is what? 2.7 meters long, maybe? This part here, the part that Elias didn't break and he fell over. It was the part that wasn't from our guys, yeah? But this is about just over 2 meters. 18 meters long, right? High, 127 pillars. Right? Ephesus would have looked at those pillars and knew exactly what Paul was talking about. The church, they were the strength, the foundation, the thing that held up the temple. The church was to be that. Those pillars. And MacArthur made a beautiful point in relation to this reality. I want to read it from his commentary. And I quote, "Although it is the collective responsibility of the gathered believers to support the word, that cannot occur unless each believer is committed to that duty." End quote. Did you get what I'm saying? Although it is a collective responsibility of the church to do that, every single one of you, that's not possible if you're not committed individually to that duty. Holding up God's word. Upholding the truth. And then he goes on to give 8 ways a believer can uphold the truth. I wish I could give it to you. We're out of time. Read his commentary on 1 Timothy. 8 ways a believer upholds the truth. Meditate on it, pray on it, defend it. He gives all those realities, and I absolutely loved reading it. It was a good refresher. We can end it there. Godliness will be the theme of the next section. The chapter breaks are a bit funny, so I'm not going to end the chapter. Remember, the chapters didn't exist. I think godliness will be the next theme. But I want to remind you of that. This is important. Church structure is important. You don't just want to behave willy-nilly. This was our contention with the old guard, with the old way the church was run. Anyone could do anything at any time. It really undermined this. Timothy, I'm writing these things to you, do them. This is how you conduct yourself in the household of God. And hold up the truth, which holds up the truth, which safeguards it, and which every individual in that body should be doing. Remember this. Don't see deacon, don't see elder, see me. When I say me, I mean you, but from your perspective. I'm not talking about me. I'll see me as well. Right? So think about that. And read these qualifications and think, Lord, you know what? I may not desire the office, but this is the Christian I want to be. Help me. And we'll be alongside you, trying to help you as well. And you will help us. Works both ways. Amen? Let's end it there. Lord, we thank you. We thank you for your words. We thank you for the pattern and the structure which you've given us. We bless you for that. We don't have disdain for your created order. We don't have disdain for your rules. If anyone is struggling with them, please help us, Lord, to uplift them and to revere them, to revere your household, to revere your people, to hold up the truth, to defend it, to love it, to meditate on it, to pray on it, and to pray for one another. Thank you for this church. We have our issues, but help us to see them and help us to deal with them. There is no perfect local body, Lord. Please make us aware of our problems and help us to do what's right for your glory forevermore. Amen.